Hello and welcome to MusicEL Pathways, the podcast which focuses on the different pathways musicians take in order to reach their musical goals. And today we're going to be talking to another teacher over here at MusicEL so that you can get to know us all a little bit better. Our guest today is a bassist and ukuleleist supreme. Today we have MusicEL's own parallel universe version of John Deacon. She's a vast amount of experience in both performing and recording, along with teaching at the Cornwall Music Service Trust. She's now joining us here at the team at MusicEL, teaching ukulele and bass. Today we have the awesome Miss Sian Kelly. How's it going, Sian?
That's quite the intro. Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, I know. I got there eventually. The rest will be cut out, I'm sure. So as I said at the top, we're going to have a look a bit at how you developed as a musician and how you kind of have progressed over your musical career to kind of get where you are now.
Yeah.
Cool. And while we're doing that, we're going to probably take some stops and some sideway passages on all sorts of different things that you've done throughout your career as well.
It's all about the pathways.
Yeah, that's it. Trying to find the different routes we chose to get here. But we're going to start off all the way back at the beginning, Sian. How did it start? What role did music play in your life when you were really young? Maybe even before you started playing an instrument.
So my earliest musical experiences was I got given a radio cassette player for, I think it was my 4th or my 5th birthday. And
that's old school.
Proper old school. I'm giving my age away here. And for some reason, my uncle decided that what a sort of 4 or 5-year-old girl really, really needs is the Hot 100 Radio Bahrain top hits of the 60s and 70s.
Banging.
Which I still have here actually as well. It was a six cassette set. I've only got volumes 2, 3 and 6 because, I was 5. Yeah. I've lost most of them. But it was just kind of listening to sort of all this old rock and pop and all these various things and just singing along. Mostly just singing along to the radio and discovering actually radio stations for myself because there's nothing like being a kid. You just like twiddling the knobs and messing around with stuff. And having this radio cassette player, I think it had AM and FM. So there was all these stations just sitting there twiddling the knobs and seeing what came out and singing along to it, really.
Yeah, I remember when I was like really young and like playing on my granddad's FM.
Oh, yeah.
And it had AM as well. And because of where we are in Cornwall,
yep,
we used to pick up loads of like French and Irish and like really different music. I remember like some of the music being so different and weird just because it was completely foreign
Absolutely.
to us, like some of the French stuff.
Yeah, literally on a really good
like,
day, for whatever reason, on a really good day, really nice weather, I think just the radio waves just sort of carried further and you'd end up with all sorts.
Yeah.
It was really great fun.
That's pretty awesome. So it mainly started out, were you singing a lot just kind of by yourself or did you sing as part of your family or in school or anything like that? Or was it kind of just something you did at home?
At home, it was very much just me, my cassette player, just having the time of my life singing along to stuff and all these old songs. In school, we obviously had school choir, so I'd sort of go along, took part in that. And the other thing I did in school, in primary school at least, was recorder. Sort of being in the 80s, everyone played the recorder. So, kind of did my time on the recorder.
It's a classic, isn't it?
It
is a classic.
It's something out there.
Yeah, I got taught recorder by one of the teachers that works with us now, Mrs. Mann.
Fantastic.
She taught me the recorder.
Brilliant.
Jan taught me the recorder when I was in primary school.
Fantastic.
Pretty impressive. Yeah. I probably could not play anything on the recorder now.
It's quite funny. I did my GCSE music performance on Treble Recorder. So
oh, really?
It was kind of a slightly weird journey because I sort of played it in primary school and I'd always sort of picked up bits and bobs throughout secondary school. Once I hit secondary school, I started playing the flute.
Yeah.
And that was my first formal music tuition then, was on the flute when I hit year 7. And then sort of got to about year 9.
I didn't even know you played the flute. I didn't even know you played. Do you play it very much anymore?
I keep it very, very quiet and don't admit to these sort of things. So this is me bearing my soul now on this podcast. It's my secret is out there and I can never retract it. So
yeah, everyone now knows.
I do still have a couple of flute students in 1 or 2 of my schools. It's the schools where there's only one kid that plays the flute, so it's easier for me to pick it up than send someone else in to do it. Sort of in the middle of nowhere.
So, makes sense.
Yeah. And then, treble recorder. A lot of the range of the treble recorder is the same as the flute. So a lot of the music and the repertoire crosses over. So, yeah.
Are either of your parents musical? Or?
No, not at all.
No. I think that's so funny. What about grandparents?
Yeah.
Is it like at all?
My granddad on my mum's
It
side.
did this thing where it skipped.
I think so,
It did the thing where it skipped over.
It was quite a weird thing because, my granddad on my mum's side was quite musical, sort of always play some bits and bobs.
Yeah.
He died when I was about 10. And actually, he's the reason I started playing the piano. He had, not long before he went, he had a sort of electric organ there up in the house.
Right,
up country where they lived. And I think I'd gone to stay with my nan and granddad that sort of for a little while. And I was just noodling about on this piano. And they were actually, you know what? Take that back to Cornwall with you. So we sort of had to cram in. And I'm sat in the back seat of the car with the sort of Bontempi organ sort of rammed in next to me.
Is that one of those ones where it's got like the fan inside?
It did have a fan, definitely. It was very, very noisy and very heavy.
Yeah, ours was really light. My nan gave me one because my parents aren't especially musical, but my nan and granddad definitely are. And my nan has been playing like the organ for something insane, like 85 years or something. Yeah, it's pretty intense. But she gave us this like really lightweight organ with a fan in it, and the fan was so loud. And if you push too many keys, it didn't work.
Oh wow!
So it goes like do 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 do.
That's it. The processor memory has had enough.
Yeah,
I do remember you had to have it a certain volume to hide the fan, but it weighed a ton. It was quite hefty. Really? But that lasted for a good while. I think it finally sort of conked out. It got this sort of funny little glitch where all the B flat keys just suddenly went really, really weird, and then all the E flats went, and it's like the circuits were just gradually just went. But they obviously didn't approve of Teenage Charm playing Oasis on it, I guess. I don't really know. So
I think most things don't approve of Oasis, so I don't blame it. I don't blame it. I'm letting other people know my
your musical
dislike
tastes
for a band. Yeah. Anything but.
Yes.
So you kind of started on the flute and then went over to the recorder. When did you first then move over to string instruments?
And strings wise, I think I was in about the end of year 8, I think, and someone that my stepdad worked with loaned us a guitar. I don't quite know how it came about. It was just like one day we went over to their house to pick up a guitar, and I don't recall it coming from me, but I think obviously it was someone they worked with, and they're like, she should learn the guitar. Let's borrow a guitar. So I borrowed a guitar from them for a little while, and it was like a little 3/4 size Herald, sort of one of the sort of small, cheap and cheerful.
Yeah.
And again, being sort of teenage into the guitar bands or the Britpop stuff and stuff like that, I just kind of taught myself to play from some of the sort of piano vocal books and sort of tab books and that kind of thing, really. So
I guess you already had like a lot of the ear training and the notation, maybe a bit from the flute, a little bit of theory behind you. So picking up the guitar wasn't too bad.
Yeah, that definitely crossed over. A lot of it was from chord boxes. That was sort of how I taught myself to play, was sort of finding my way on the chord boxes, and then it's sort of transferring the reading the music with the notes on the strings and everything. So yeah.
Did you have like formal lessons on flute
Yes, I had flute lessons in primary school. The recorder was kind of like the recorder club at lunchtime, which I did the beginners recorder club, and then to my shame, I stopped intermediate recorder club because I didn't like the teacher. This is going to become a recurring theme. And then I realised that if I wanted to join senior recorder club with the teacher I liked, I had to learn to read music, and this is where prop number 2 comes into this, which is really handy on an audio-only format. It was a book called How to Read Music that I got given for like my 10th birthday, I think. And I still refer to this now. It's a brilliant book.
Really?
Yeah. It's kind of got all sorts in there.
It's not like one of those, like, have you ever seen like the old Beatle arrangements for classical guitar?
No.
I've got one here somewhere that my nan gave me. And it's so hard to read because it's obviously written by someone who grew up in like very proper English in the 50s and 60s, and it's intense. Like, it's so intense. I can't read the music in it because it's so ostentatious. Like, it's ostentatious. Like, it's just like so full of everything that it just. I don't know. Have you ever come across like the A Tune a Day series, that kind of thing? It's very much that sort of sounds like.
The sort of thing where it's for beginners playing the instrument, but whether you're a child or an adult, you will learn the same way. And here's all these words on the page, and you're just looking at it cross-eyed, like, what?
But like I said, even the notation, it's like they've put every single like bit of articulation is written down on the page. You know, like if it was just the note, it would be fine. But they've put like the exact finger you should be using and how much pressure you need, and this note is louder than this note.
It's like, information overload when you're just trying to process what that note is on that line, on that funny thing on the page that looks like tadpoles on a ladder. It's a lot to take in as a young person. But that particular book, I sort of taught myself to read music so that I could get into senior recorder ensemble and sit on the mats and play recorder and assembly. So my drivers were less than sort of musical.
Life goals.
In the beginning, it was not the most musical drivers, but it was the realisation through playing music that actually I like this. I seem to be kind of good at this. Maybe I should do more with it. And one of the teachers in primary school did actually say to my parents that, look, you know, because I was playing the recorder, you really want to get her onto a sort of a decent instrument. You know, sort of, she's got music.
A real
she
instrument.
can do stuff. You want to get her on a proper instrument, I think were the exact words.
The classic thing that everyone gets told with it's like ukulele in some ways as well. You know, now you've got good at ukulele, you can go onto a real guitar.
I know, and it's
It's like, well, maybe not. I think it's one of those instruments where it's easy to pick up, so therefore you think that's where it ends. But like with any instrument, it's kind of infinite.
It goes as far as you can
make it.
Make it go. And I think ukulele's definitely replaced recorder as the sort of instrument of choice in primary schools. There's a lot more. I mean, so going into primary schools now, and you still sort of see the sort of slightly dusty box of recorders in the corner. And I think obviously now, because of COVID, because of all the sort of restrictions and the hygiene behind it, I think it's one of those things that recorders, I think they're going to be out of fashion for a little bit longer because of it's not like in primary school you used to just share the box of recorders and then just put it back at the end of the session. There's a lot of stuff there. You can't do that now.
I think the real draw for ukulele more than anything though is that they can sing and play it. Like I think that's almost because the downfall of the recorder is that you've got to put it in your mouth and therefore you can't
do anything else with it. No.
And I think like, although, you know, I did see a video of a guy with like 2 recorders and he beatboxed. That was pretty impressive. Like,
life goals.
It was pretty cool. But yeah, I think that's the real change for the ukulele. I do think it is more to do with the fact that they can sing.
It's more accessible, and I think so you can play more modern music on it.
Yes,
I do remember one of the incidents from my childhood where I incurred the wrath of my mum was sitting in my room. I'd progressed onto a Walkman by this stage, so I had headphones in, sitting in my room, sort of playing along to it on my Walkman. I didn't realise the clocks had gone forwards, so in a sense it was about 6:30 in the morning, and I'm there trying to play along to like Total Eclipse of the Heart or something on the recorder. Next thing I know, the door flies open. Mum comes in, grabs the window, flies open, whooing, and just lands in the ground like a javelin. It just sat there like.
I was going to say, last time you saw that recorder.
The visual is burnt on my memory, just kind of stuck in the floor like a javelin. She got a good couple of meters on that. It was impressive.
That's pretty great. So we've got kind of up to you doing acoustic guitar now, and I guess you're on the way out of secondary school by this sort of point, is it?
So with guitar, it's sort of end of year 8 and over the summer holidays then that I really got into it. And I went to Helston School, and it's sort of quite a very big, busy music department there. So one of the things that the real flagship ensemble was the Helston School Jazz Orchestra. I think it still is. In fact, it's a big ensemble. Anyone who works for CMST who went to Helston School has been through ensemble. Verena Watkis, Ross Hamilton, myself. I think there's a few other people as well. Luana Thrussell. We're all sort of came through the jazz orchestra at some stage or another. And at that time, the guitarist in the jazz orchestra was in the year below me, and he was amazing. So I had absolutely no chance of getting in there on the guitar. So I was kind of like, oh, right, okay. So at that point, having not had enough, instruments in my life playing sort of recorder, keyboard, guitar, flute. So, if I play sax, there's lots of saxes in that. Maybe I'll get in that way. So there was a little sort of diversion into sax in year 10.
Which is quite common for flute players,
same fingers, yep. So exactly the same thing. It's just, a very, very different embouchure mouth technique.
Right, yeah, of course.
Yes. But by this stage, I actually got into the junior jazz orchestra on guitar, which was great. I was like, oh, okay, so I'm in the junior jazz orchestra on guitar. I've got my foot through the door. Maybe I could swap onto sax so I can get into the big band. And then the bass player in the junior jazz orchestra was ill just before a Christmas concert. So with a couple of days sort of notice, I was like, well, I'll have a go at the bass part if you want, because bass is more important than guitar in the jazz orchestra.
Yeah.
And this is the point where I discovered I'm a bass player.
Right.
Because I think it's the first time I'd picked up an instrument, played an instrument, and not wanted to play another instrument. I was kind of in there like, okay.
Do you think the like multiple instruments before was maybe like hunting?
I think there's an element of just like
trying to find...
Trying it out. Okay, no. Oh, I like this. Oh, I like this. Oh, that's a bit high and squeaky. Oh, I like this. And then, sort of gradually working my way down and discovering strings are the way forward. So, and the fewer strings, the better. 4 is the magic number.
4 is the magic number. And then, so you were on double bass then. Did you manage to stay on double bass?
It was bass guitar for that one, actually.
Oh, right, bass guitar.
Double bass is a bit later.
Oh, right, okay.
That's another story. So
that's another strange story.
It's all linked. On bass guitar in the jazz orchestra at that stage. So that was my first experience of depping. So depping, for sort of people listening who might not know, is when you step in and you cover for another musician. A lot of my career has started out with depping in some form or another. So I'm here to kind of preach the art form, as it were, of depping. Because
well, I think depping is like, if you can't dep, you are cut off in a lot of ways from experiencing different music.
It's the experiences and also the sort of doors that it opens by being able to step in at the last minute and cover something else or sort of stand in and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think likewise. I think I've had absolutely loads of gigs and gotten loads of work afterwards just from stepping in and doing my bit for the time.
Absolutely.
It is a art form in itself.
It completely is. There's just so many elements of that discipline, things that make you a very good musician overall. It's something that is, everyone can learn from. And I think it's good for everyone to sort of step in and cover and dep at some stage in their career, because it does sort of push you on as a musician, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, people do it all the way to the end of their career.
Totally.
Like there's some who is it? Like Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers also played on the Mars Volta albums. Weird. It happened though, and it's one of those things where you would have never known that was him on those albums either. No, he managed to get his head in the space of that band and not the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and that's the real skill when it comes to depping, is being able to mold yourself to fit the band, as opposed to being a driving force in the band.
Yeah, it's sort of being sort of fitting to what they want and how they want you to play.
Yeah.
And slotting into that dynamic rather than sort of like, well, this is what you get, rah, and playing everything slap style, and at the end they're going, we're a folk band, that doesn't fit. So there's nothing wrong with slap, Sian. Yeah, I know.
A bit of slap in a folk song, absolutely perfect.
I'm only saying that because I can't slap. I still can't do it. You've given me how many crash courses and I still haven't quite nailed that yet.
It's easy. It's fine. It's fine. So that was your kind of first thing, depping. Do you think that kind of gave you a bit of a bug for depping then as well, like in the long run?
I think it gave me the confidence to do it, because it was only with a couple of days' notice, and it was like, right, okay, here's a bass from the school. I can't even remember what it was now. It was like a Washburn style sort of black, sort of grey, little black crackle sort of effect. And I think I remember the action being terrible as well, but it was the nicest of the bad bunch in the school basses. So sort of being given the music, given a bass, and right, off you go. And then going in and doing the concert and sort of saving the day as well, which was quite nice. And then a couple of months later, this is when I was in year 10 now, year 11, the musicians at Helston School, one of the music teachers used to also provide musicians for like Helston Opera Group. So you'd sort of have the pit musicians, theatre musicians for Helston Opera Group, and you'd sort of have the sort of core players that were pros, and then they'd sort of fill the numbers and sort of add in some students to give us experience and to sort of boost the numbers and stuff.
Yeah, just make it sound a bit bigger without costing them loads of money, essentially.
Pretty much. And it's quite fun actually, because again, that was someone dropped out 2 weeks before the show. And again, it was like, right, Sian, here's a bass, here's the score, see what you can do with it. So it's like,
you've done that before.
Okay, we know you can step up. So, okay, and, just sort of went away, sat down. It was Sound of Music, so it was really quite straightforward for the most part.
Right. Okay.
And just sort of sat and played bass guitar for that and did the show, and that kind of set the tone for a lot of things, really. Just the sort of stepping in.
Had you played bass since you depped the first time to the second time, or was it like, did you play the first time and then the second time they handed you a bass and you hadn't played it since that?
I think actually after the first time, I swapped with the bass player because she wanted to play guitar,
right? Okay.
And I decided I wanted to play bass, so we just basically swapped seats.
Ah, cool. Yeah.
So I stayed as the bass player in the sort of jazz 2, and then she took over on guitar.
That's a bit less intense. I was like, I thought you would like, oh yeah, leave that one back there and then just jump on it again later on.
There you go. I mean, I haven't played this instrument for a couple of months, but oof.
Yeah, there you go.
No, it was there was bass playing in between.
Bit of continuity.
Yeah,
cool. That's awesome.
And then sort of unexpected events, sort of 2 months after that, meant that the bass player in the actual main jazz orchestra had to leave college. So it was like, right, okay, Sean, here's a massive folder of music. Here's my Mustang bass, my 1966 Mustang bass that I'd like you to use.
Right.
Off you go. And sort of 3 weeks before doing a gig in the Royal Festival Hall.
Oh my God.
So for the Music for Youth Festival. So again, it's kind of like short notice, off you go.
Short notice, lots of pressure.
In the middle of sitting my GCSEs as well at this point. So
oh, lovely.
This is lovely. I sort of sat there revising for my textiles exam, playing Under the Sea or something, on the bass, just kind of learning these different charts and stuff. And so
a bit of pressure never hurts, though, does it? That little bit of pressure sometimes just makes you fully commit and concentrate.
Yeah.
I need pressure. Without pressure, nothing happens.
It's quite funny. It's one of those things that I look back on it now and I think, good grief, how did I do that? It's really not appreciating maybe the enormity of it at the time. Just like, okay, I've got a bass, let's do this. And then suddenly like, whoa, okay, this is quite big. I think a mixture of pressure and complete oblivion is probably the best way of summing that up.
I think having that background of being able to read really does help though in those situations. Like you don't have to. It takes away the figuring out part, which is sometimes half the war when you're trying to learn a new song. If you can just plonk it in front of you, even being able to just read chords. Yeah. Just gives you that step up straight away,
totally.
Because you've at least got a starting point for your learning process. And I think then when you can read score on top of that, you're almost handed it all on a plate, and you can make with it as you will. You know exactly what should be there and what you could probably change.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff as well. I mean, depending on the circumstances, when you're doing depping on something that's scored out, generally it's been written out that way for a reason. So I've got to play what's on the page. I can't deviate from this too much because it might mess with in the jazz band, for example, you've got bass trombones in the same register as you, you've got the piano that's also playing in the same register as you, you've got the baritone sax. So sometimes you have to really stick to what is written, otherwise you're going to hit a note that clashes with one of those instruments that's playing in the same range and register of notes as you, and then it kind of gets very muddy and murky, and you've got to sort of try and sort that out somehow. So
and the other one is, especially in jazz music, is when you've got that moving harmony where the bass line has to do a specific movement to kind of make the chords sound right. Otherwise all the chords lose their kind of tonal center sometimes. Absolutely. And then they're back in and then it's gone again in the next chord. So there's definitely a time and a place for reading exactly what's on the page. 100%, especially for, I always find musicals.
Theatre stuff.
Really, you've got to be on it with theatre stuff, because I always remember I did a performance of Wicked. Oh wow! And this song called Popular. Yes. And they take like these long pauses between each of the words, but it pitches down a chord for each one. Yeah. So if everyone doesn't play the right chord as they say the right word, it sounds horrific. Absolutely. Just the worst thing in the world. but when it's right, it's right. It sounds really, really good. So that's definitely a case of must read exactly what's on the chord.
In opera you get the sort of recitative where it's sort of a held chord and you're holding it underneath, and then you've got to hit another chord on a certain note, and the singer's going at their speed. You've got to be following your conductor and also keeping an eye on your score and waiting for the drop on that downbeat to change.
And that's so difficult, reading music and following a conductor. I remember the first time I had to do that, and I just couldn't. My brain just couldn't cope with the fact that I had to. I remember leaning down really low and looking over the top of the page at the conductor, but still being able to see the page. That doesn't work.
I mean, pit playing and that kind of thing, that's a whole skill in itself as well. Sort of orchestral playing, following a conductor, all that kind of stuff. It really does. Yeah, there's a whole sort of set of skills in another sort of world, really.
And where did you go after your secondary school? Because you did music at college and university.
University, I did a Bachelor of Music at Cardiff University. So there were 3 great years sort of studying there, at sort of in the music department at the university. Because there is also the Royal Welsh College of Music Drama sort of 5 minutes down the road from the uni, and there was always quite a healthy rivalry between the 2 departments, as it were. So
I know a lot of Welsh guys, and I've heard.
Yes,
I've heard. So you went up there, and were you on electric, or had you moved over to double by then? Or
so sort of the next step in the journey after sort of becoming a bass guitarist, playing in Helston School Jazz Orchestra, and sort of lots of ensembles then in school and in sixth form. Then, because I could read, it was that sort of thing. It's like, oh, we need someone for the string ensemble. Can you just come and do this on the rehearsal and then fill it in on the fine, and that kind of stuff, and playing through different things. During this time as well, I was still doing the shows for Helston Opera Group,
right?
And they started doing some like Gilbert and Sullivan type stuff. I had a bit of a crash course then in playing double bass. One of the teachers at Helston was kind of like, sort of gave me a bit of a sort of heads up on how the finger positions work and where you put your fingers, because it is the same strings as the bass guitar.
Yeah,
but it's just working in position rather than frets. So it's like, okay. So I kind of found my way around on that, and they were like, "Do you want to do double bass in sort of Ruddigore?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll give that a crack," sort of thing. So again, just sort of like borrowed a school bass. Sort of had this 3/4 size bass in my bedroom for about a year, just playing through various things and noodling about. Yeah, so that was where double bass entered my life, as it were. I was kind of like, okay, bass guitar, double bass, this is good. I'm still a first study flautist when I go to uni.
Oh, what? So when you went to uni, you still went as a flutist?
I auditioned and went in as a first study flute.
Right, okay.
But I thought, I've got the opportunity now to have proper bass lessons with a proper bass teacher.
Right.
Sort of, they gave me the phone numbers of the 2. I had to pay for it, but it was like quite subsidised. So they gave me the phone numbers of sort of 2 people that came in and did the teaching. So I phoned up. It was from the payphone in the halls of residence as well, so I had to keep putting like 10p's in to sort of have this conversation. And I can still kind of picture my bass teacher's voice. Kind of.
Who was your bass teacher?
There's a lady called Mary Conliffe. She's in the Welsh National Opera. She's been in Welsh National Opera for quite a long time, actually. So she's one of the hardline members. She's absolute phenomenal teacher. She's
a legend,
a teacher who has completely changed my life, changed the course that I was on, but also inspired me as a teacher and how I do stuff. So I can still sort of picture her voice when she sort of said, okay, so what do you know already? What do you say? And I was like, I can play a B flat major and an F major scale. And she was like, right, okay, we'll sort of see what we can do. And that sort of began almost a lifelong friendship as well, really, because I'm sort of quite pleased to say that obviously through my first year at uni, playing bass with Mary and playing flute, I was sort of becoming more and more demoralised with the flute, more and more with these symphony orchestra and stuff like that. For woodwind players in particular, you don't get a chance to do any orchestral playing really until you get to the 3rd year. You gotta kind of just go off and do things. So I was right, okay, well I'll play bass in the University Symphony Orchestra because there's only 3 of us. So kind of got in that way. And the more I sort of did that way throughout the year and the more I had lessons with Mary, I was kind of like, I want to switch to first study bass. Mary was like, right, if you're going to do this, you're going to need to do grade 8. So I was like, right, okay, challenge accepted. So after a year of bass lessons and randomness, in the sort of autumn term of my 2nd year of uni, I did grade 8 bass and swapped over to first study bass.
Right, yeah.
So that was kind of the slightly random path.
But that was double bass.
Double bass now, yes.
So electric.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I cannot. I had to do, as part of my university, some double bass stuff, and my hands do not like double bass. I don't know how anyone copes with the tension over a double bass. Like my basses all have the lowest action physically possible to man, and the lightest strings available from a shop shelf. If I see a lighter set of strings, I buy them. That is me. And the double bass is like my sworn enemy.
You've got to get the right setup. It is kind of all about the setup and how you do it. I do have a couple of bass students that I teach in schools, and the instruments you've got in schools, I do actually wonder how some of them manage to get a sound out of these basses, particularly one that I've got working towards grade 5 at the moment. And she was a bit late for a lesson one day, so I was there with the school bass trying to play what she was playing. I was like, oh my goodness, this is I'm going to take my hat off to her here, because this action's awful. It's really quite hard to sort of move quickly, and then you get to like the high D, which would be like fret 7.
Some bass players really like that. Like I've got a couple I've got a couple double bass player friends, and their basses, honestly, even their electric basses, I cannot touch.
No,
their double basses are just ridiculous, and I don't understand. I literally, one of them, his jazz bass has probably got half an inch clearance up at the top fret, and he's a monster. He's such a good player, but I can't. No, I can't.
My double bass background is very much classical and sort of symphonic and that sort of thing, so it's a lot lower action, and it's also having the strings that are good for bowing and kind of getting that in. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's
these guys are like jazz guys, so I guess they want that more like that.
You get a lot more
sharp,
sustain and attack, don't you, on that, rather than the sort of bowed sound and all that kind of stuff.
No, that does make sense. That does make sense. Through your career then, after school, I guess, were you still predominantly doing a lot of orchestral work, or is that when you started doing a few more bands and being in like more rocky stuff, or did that not come along till later?
It's kind of interesting. When I was actually in uni, in sort of second, third year of uni, we sort of formed a bit of a covers band with a couple of my mates, a couple of guys in my year and a singer in the year above me. It was sort of basically, we ended up being called Short Notice because we formed 3 days before our first gig. So that was the name we came up with in the dressing room backstage at the Athletics Union Ball. Like, right, what are we called, guys? You know, kind of after a lot of very dodgy sort of things, it was Short Notice. You know, and we did an EP called Available At. It was Short Notice. So that was very much sort of standard covers band fare then. Sort of, I think we were a 5-piece. So it was keys, guitar, bass, drums, and a singer. And if you're in Wales, you're doing like 4 or 5 stereophonic songs a gig. Actually, I don't think we did any.
No,
we were sort of much more classic, like wedding band kind of repertoire rather than anything else. So it's playing through the standards.
That is classic wedding band in Wales. They love the stereophonics. They love them. So that was quite fun.
So we did a couple of gigs with those guys. Sort of forming, recording an EP, and just sort of doing bits and pieces just to sort of get a bit of money in as gigging musicians.
Yeah.
All the while still playing very classical stuff. Getting involved in a little bit of musical theatre, sort of doing some like review shows and being involved in that. And then after I graduated from uni, I moved back to Cornwall for a year to kind of just work and see what was going on.
Figure out
what's going on. Sort of just worked in an admin job that was quite nice, and was still trying to get involved in as much orchestral playing as I could. A lot of the playing down here is quite pick up sort of based, so it would be sort of like a rehearsal on the Friday and Saturday, and then the concert is on the Saturday night. So there was sort of a couple of different orchestras that I sort of go and do stuff with, which was quite nice.
There's not as many kind of like long term, you know, every week they do a performance type groups down here, isn't there?
There's a couple of sort of community based orchestras that do rehearsals every week. I think there's Penzance Orchestral Society, and I think there's a couple of others dotted around. But for those guys,
you're not going to make a living doing it.
No, those guys, it is very much people playing for fun, and with those sort of things, it's the actual reliability and being there each week is the kind of important thing. It's it feels a little bit cheeky to sort of just rock up like one rehearsal before the concert and then join in, because these guys have been working so hard for a couple of months on the repertoire, and it feels a little bit disrespectful to their level of commitment then to just kind of turn up, do it, and then waltz off again. So
Yeah, I've definitely done that for a few of those guys. I know what you mean though.
Yeah.
Like you can see they're putting all the hard work in, and you're like kind of blasting through whatever's there.
I don't mind,
and hoping it is somewhat what they expect.
I've done a few things where I have sort of gone in and depped, or it's been tricky repertoire. So I've been like, well, I'm kind of busy with private teaching or stuff like that, but I can do a couple of rehearsals in the concert if you're happy to let me come and do that. And got to play some quite interesting stuff. I finally got to play Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique, which is awesome symphonic piece, and Tchaikovsky 4 as well. That's a monster of a symphony. So I kind of did get to play some quite fun repertoire off the back of sort of negotiating, going to rehearsals.
Awesome.
But yeah, so after a year of sort of in Cornwall doing musical theatre stuff and a little bit of orchestral stuff, I thought, actually, I want to try and do this a bit more seriously. So I applied to Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama to do a postgrad in orchestral double bass playing. So I kind of got everything together, got my audition pieces together, got in, because bass players, if you're an orchestral double bass player, everywhere loves you, because it's one of those things, there's not a lot of us about. So opportunities are out there to be grabbed. So it's kind of...
I think that goes for bass players in general, doesn't it?
Yes, very much so. So, yeah, went to Welsh Carl, did a year of a postgraduate diploma in performance there. I had a fantastic time doing that. And again, the sort of the last minute stepping in kind of thing with the sort of almost depping style stuff was I got a student placement with the BBC National Orchestra of Wales.
Right, okay.
So I actually got to sit in. The student placement scheme was you got to sit in and rehearse with the orchestra. So you'd sort of get given your music in advance and you sort of look through it and work out what was going on, and it would be already marked up with the bowing that you were supposed to use and all the different sort of things that you had to then do. And then you'd sort of go out and rock along and spend a day, 2 days, whatever, rehearsing with the orchestra and getting the experience of playing with professional musicians, which was fantastic. Really incredible experience.
That is cool.
Especially when you're sat next to double bass number 8, who's just got the Guardian on the music stand next to him. So he's got his music stand in front of him, and then he's got a second music stand for the sort of, the newspaper and the Sunday supplement or whatever. It's doing the crossword in the rests. It's quite eye-opening.
But I have seen that before. Like I did some like sit-in work in some theatres up in Bristol, and like you in between songs. Yeah. If you're not doing very much, they're doing all sorts down there. Just no one knows. Everyone's sat behind them.
It depends on the shows as well. I mean, certainly a lot of the older style shows, there's a lot of gaps between the musical numbers, and it's not very taxing music. So you do get these massive long breaks. I know sort of number of times I've done Oliver or My Fair Lady, and or Oklahoma. I think I marked an entire school's worth of books once because it was a really long show, and we had a lot of breaks for dialogue. So I took my marking in with me because I was in the Princess Pavilions in Falmouth, and the pit barrier was about 6 foot high. So it was great. Nobody could see the musicians because the pit barrier was as high as the stage. So I'm just there like marking all my year 3 notebooks. Right, okay, great, yeah. Just got through like 2 years worth of marking just over the course of the show.
Did you when you did Oliver, did that spinning around the lamppost bass line catch you? That massive like chromatic, but missing notes as it runs up like monster bass line that appears out of nowhere.
I've done Oliver so many times. I'm quite. It's one of those ones. I've done it on bass guitar, but I've also played it on double bass quite a lot. And it's really good fun on the bit. And the coffin music, that's quite the sort of going boop, 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 boop. You sort of all these sort of funky little lines just coming out of nowhere. I quite like that one.
That spinning around the lamppost, I was not paying attention and I was just reading it as we were going. Yeah. And I just flicked the page over just as it was about to happen, and it was bricks. It was ridiculous. It was not a it was actually fine. Yeah. It sounded fine. It was okay. I definitely missed a few notes. But
I think my worst one was actually depping on Beauty and the Beast, and there's a bit in the middle of Be Our Guest, which I think it goes into tenor clef, and it's a double speed sort of thing, and it's on a page turn. Yeah. So you're kind of there playing along, you think that's absolutely fine, and it's a really exposed solo, and then all of a sudden you turn the page, you've changed clef, you've changed speed, and then it's just like and I was depping on that one, and I couldn't say what happened. It was one of those moments I think my brain just blocked it out for the good of mankind.
Yeah, I remember I have done that one, and I do seem to remember there being an absolutely horrible section.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing it's probably that one.
Yeah.
No, I totally get it. So have some of your like favourite performances been more of that symphonic stuff then?
Yeah, I've had some absolutely fantastic chances to sort of play in amazing venues, sort of with the Welsh College, Royal Welsh College Symphony Orchestra, with the University Symphony Orchestra doing St David's Hall, and yeah, just getting to do orchestral stuff has been incredible. I mean, the other thing as well, off the back of the theatre stuff and playing in a covers band, then ending up sort of playing pop music in other bands as well and depping for other bands locally. Usually a lot of it's come about through theatre work, actually, where you've worked with someone in theatre, they've been in a band and they've been like, oh, we need a bass player to cover such and such a couple of gigs because someone's on maternity leave or something like that. So I know Ross mentioned a couple of weeks ago 4 Tons of Funk.
Yeah.
And I did a little bit of depping for those guys when their bass player was on paternity leave. So that was amazing fun, getting to go and do that. That was a big step out of my comfort zone, actually, because I'd been in a lot of sort of classic covers band kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then suddenly having to really play this all-out, in-your-face funk bass lines, it was like, well, this is a lot more exposed and technical than I would normally be playing. But it was a fantastic...
Yeah, and you're really high in the mix there, aren't you?
You are.
Like you can't hide yourself.
Yeah, so it was a really good boost for me as a bass player to go out and play this all-out funk stuff, in your face bass lines that everyone knows. And it's like, okay, that sort of boosts your confidence a little bit, sort of going on and doing things like that's outside your comfort zone.
Yeah, I do love the funk. I'm a big fan of the funk. Yeah. Well, funk and rock. Funk and rock. But both of them are pretty driving on the bass front. And even more modern pop now, I think the bass has come forward again. I think it was forward back at the beginning, kind of not dipped out entirely, but went further back into the mix.
It went quite synth based for a while, didn't it? And then its resurgence of it again now.
I almost feel like kind of in the 80s the bass became much more it was much more locked in with the kick, and I think that was the main thing, is that bass line was so locked in with the kick that it was essentially the kick.
You're just kind of following that, you just kind of programmed in with that, and that's that. And then I think it's come back out now. I think there's some really cool bass lines in pop music now. Yeah, really, really interesting stuff out there. Yeah.
What was your biggest gig then? What was the most people in front of you?
I'm trying to think now, because carrying on the depping journey, moving from depping for 4 Tons of Funk, and I depped for a couple of local folk bands and some singer-songwriters locally. Off the back of that, about 3.5 years ago, I saw a post, or I got tagged in a post on Facebook, and it was a band called the Good Old Fashioned Lover Boys, Queen tribute band. They put up a post. Their bassist had just been scat off his bike and sort of broken his collarbone, it was in an absolute mess. And they were supporting The Darkness like 3 days later. So the post went up on the Monday, and they were doing a support slot for The Darkness at the Watering Hole on the Thursday. And sort of saying, any bassists out there want to do this? And someone that I'd done some theatre stuff had tagged me in that post. And I was like, if they're up for a female John Deacon, I'll give it a crack. That sounds like a laugh. And it turns out their keyboard player...
Parallel universe.
Yeah, parallel universe. Their keyboard player is someone I'd done theatre work with. So off the back of that, I kind of got a phone call saying, we're rehearsing tomorrow. This is the set. So kind of spent the whole... Luckily, it was in the summer holidays. So this sort of frantic Tuesday sat listening to all these Queen songs, trying to write down chords and getting everything written up and sort of frantically ready for a rehearsal that evening. Sort of went up to the rehearsal room, sort of sat in, did the rehearsal, and they were like, okay, this is all right, this is going to work, we're going to be okay. And then spent the next 2 days still trying to learn more and more and more of the set, trying to memorise it, because I was there with my notebook in front of me, kind of like with the chord progressions. And Queen is really, really tricky because it sounds so simple, but then it doesn't go where you expect it to go. You're sort of following it. And the other thing is they never end the phrase the same way twice.
No.
So you get to the end of verse 1 and it ends in a certain way. Am I going A to a D? You get to the end of verse 2, it's a D to an A. You get to the end of verse 3, it's an E to an A or something. You're like, trying to find your way through
it's
these.
It's that classic thing where like when you write something, it's easy. When you have to learn someone else's playing, it's never quite so easy, is it? And I think I think they're very instinctual in the way that they wrote stuff, and therefore there is like a lot of variation through the song. So if you're going to play them exactly by the book, you know, there's a lot to take in there.
So I think in terms of my biggest gig, it was that sort of stepping into a Queen tribute band with 3 days notice with the darkness watching you. It was quite scary, but again, did it, been there, done that, got the photo as proof, and depped for the guys depped for that band a couple of times again over that summer and the following summer, and then 3 years ago now I actually joined the band. So it's depping has actually led into the musical job now. You became the real John Deacon. Known as Jane Deacon. Yeah.
Is that what they call you?
Amongst other things. I can't repeat the rest. This is a family podcast. I can't repeat the other names.
Just Jane Deacon.
JD, yeah.
I like that. I like that.
Or Joan,
that. And you've done some cool, like, I saw like a video where you're in a big studio space or something, weren't you? Or it was a theatre space?
Yes.
I'm not sure.
We've been, one of the things that the guys have been quite keen on doing, they've been talking about before I joined the band, was developing it into a theatre show. And actually, rather than just being a punk band doing the gigs and the festivals, it's like, well, can we develop our own theatre show using that? Not kind of a We Will Rock You with a story and a narrative, but actually kind of, we do it as Queen through the decades. So we sort of start with the early 70s stuff and the really flamboyant backroom costumes and flouncing about and all that kind of stuff, and then developing into sort of the more 80s and the synthy stuff, and kind of running that across 2 sets then and building
that's
up that
way.
That's a
cool idea. I mean, and I think that's a nice way to do a tribute as well, because it's a bit more like, you can follow it a bit more. It's a bit less like, here's all the hits.
Yeah.
It's got a bit of a kind of a progression to it. You know, you can see how they developed as musicians.
Totally, and see the way the songs build and how everything builds up on top of that. Yeah.
Have you got any tips for learning songs quickly?
Tips for learning songs quickly.
It seems like that's what your
it does seem to be a bit of a
specialism. Your specialism is learning a song with exceptional speed.
I find I'm someone who has to write everything down. So if I've got to learn the lyrics to a song to sing it in the band or something, then I have to write the lyrics down. If I'm doing the bass line, I sort of usually write the chords in above. A lot of the time it's just sitting and listening. I'd say my pro tip on this is to have really good headphones, so that if you've got a chance of picking out what it is you're listening to, particularly bass, because it's not something that always comes across in little earbuds or anything like that. So having the massive over-ear good headphones with good bass drivers, you can pick out the bass lines a little bit more. You can hear what you're doing. So that's
a really good shout. And that actually going one step beyond that as well, I always like to be able to monitor myself through the same headphones, because you can hear with phase. Yeah. You can hear if you're playing the wrong note, not from necessarily knowing it's the wrong note, but you'll hear phasing issues. So I like to monitor myself and the track in my headphones, just because that way it's really obvious if you make a mistake or if something's not quite right. Whereas if you've got 2 speakers firing at you, it all gets a bit more difficult on that front. Yeah, it's been quite funny because obviously with COVID and not gigging, we've in the band we've sort of taken a lot more time to sort of stop, go back over the songs, relearn some harmonies and bits and pieces. And I got given some really nice headphones for Christmas. And suddenly it's listening back to some of these songs. I was actually in the kitchen doing the washing up with these headphones on, listening away. And it was suddenly the clarity of hearing some of these harmonies that I hadn't noticed before, but because it was really clear in the headphones, I was like, oh, okay, I need to write this down now. Sort of knee deep in washing, like kind of hang on, I need to get this down. This is, being able to hear the stuff you needed to get written down. So for me, it's writing everything down. Yeah, if it's a gig where I haven't got the score in front of me, it's writing it down and listening to it lots, actually just getting to know the songs really, really well from listening to them. Because I think even if you've got that, you kind of internalise the structure a little bit, and then you've got more chance of sort of fitting it together with other musicians if you get to rehearse it with them. In terms of depping on like a show or in something that's got a written score, it's kind of making notes, you've got your stuff there, being as prepared as you can. Try listening to the soundtrack or anything like that beforehand, so you get a feel for where some of the tricky things might be. Just the general speed, style, tempo of the pieces is always really useful. I really do think that's That's a
all
great
about
shout.
doing your homework. Yeah.
Yeah, transposing in general.
Oh yes.
Is just really useful. Really useful skill.
Yeah.
You know, if you can pick apart a song, you're instantaneously, like we said earlier, you're like another step ahead.
It's a very, very useful skill.
Super useful skill. So we're kind of on the near the end of the podcast now, I guess. We'll go for the final question, which is normally a fairly long one.
Yep.
Because it's quite a big one. It's how does music affect you as an adult now? We talked about when you were young and you were always listening to the FM radio. It sounds like you're still listening to music now. So how does it affect you as an adult? What role does it play in your life?
It's quite
even beyond playing it, I guess.
It's quite interesting because left to my own devices, I will sort of steer towards sort of prog and rock. And that's sort of side of the musical spectrum. That's kind of my comfortable territory. So a lot of it, we do tend to have quite a lot of rock on in the house, a lot of rock and alternative and a bit of metal and all that kind of stuff that we tend to listen to.
Yeah.
In terms of music, I obviously was listening to a lot of Queen because it's learning the repertoire, gradually sort of collecting all the Queen albums. It's like, well, I'm in a Queen tribute band. I need to know more than the hits. So
it's par for course when you're in a tribute band, isn't it? You know, you got to live the life.
Oh, the amount of stuff that people find for you for Christmas as well, it's staggering. There's all these random little bit like Queen in Cornwall, or sort of a random little book that mentions Roger Taylor somewhere, or kind of a T-shirt with Queen printed on it, and that kind of stuff. You know, kind of the kind of the merchandise out there is really quite something else. There's all sorts going on there. My
granddad saw Queen in a bunker on the middle of Davidstow airdrome.
Brilliant.
Which apparently was really, really early.
I can imagine. Yeah,
they got lost in the middle of Davidstow or something. Really random. Yeah. Apparently it was really, really early, and he was like, "Oh, I wish I still had the poster. I bet that poster would be worth insane money, wouldn't it?" I can't even imagine it. But they were definitely down here.
Everyone's, especially at gigs as well. You know, everyone's got a Queen or a Roger Taylor connection. With the local stuff, and it is quite funny the stuff that people come up to us and say after gigs, sort of. Oh, you know, Roger Taylor's from Truro. Yeah.
Yeah, I did realise that. Someone had told me once. I taught at his school,
not when he was there, obviously, because I'm quite a lot younger than him, but I did know that. They're quite proud of that.
That's very good. So music's still kind of around your day-to-day life. Do you still find much time for practicing, or is your practicing more, like you say, focused towards the Queen stuff now? And getting that kind of nailed down.
Yeah, it's very much a focus thing now. If I have to practice something, I kind of pick out, sort of look over the music, pick out the tricky parts, pick out the bits that I know I'm going to need to start working on, and looking through it. A lot of the time with the theatre stuff, you might get the score 2 weeks before the show, so you get that little bit of time to skim through it, look for the tricky bits. I find actually it's the more modern shows are the ones that need more work. Stuff like kind of Oliver or Sound of Music, My Fair Lady, Oklahoma, sort of MGM musical, sort of those kind of films. The bass parts aren't that taxing, so you're kind of just being 1-5 for most of it in whatever key. But when you get something like Legally Blonde or Hairspray or sort of the modern shows, they're sort of scored a lot more intricately. And like the rock shows, something like Jesus Christ Superstar, Evita, all those kinds of things. There's so much more complicated stuff in the score that you do need to sit down and look at and actually kind of play it through. Sometimes with the soundtrack, sometimes that doesn't work because they've changed the key and you're sat there thinking this doesn't sound right because everything's a tone out. And
I had that when I was practicing for School of Rock. I was practicing the electric guitar parts and I was going through them. I was like, this doesn't sound like, and I'm like, oh, they've like drop tuned all their guitars by half a step or something. I was like, oh god.
The other thing is where certainly a lot of the ones that go on tour, they'll sort of reorchestrate it for it to go out on the tour because it'll be a smaller orchestra. And then while they've done that, we'll just change the key of that as well. And you're kind of listening to the soundtrack going, okay, yeah. No.
No.
Just not right. playing along to it.
Yeah, or they just slightly played it different on that recording.
Or the cuts as
the
well.
one recording that's available.
Or where you've got the massive cuts in there, because obviously there's a big swathe of dialogue in the original. And they're kind of like, on the cast recording, we're going to sort of chop out this sort of 5 minutes of dialogue and just cut to bar 673. So finding your way around that. You
lose all the like little background stuff, don't you, and all that. Yeah. No, that is hard. Cool. Well, it's been awesome chatting to you anyway, Sian. I hope whoever is listening to this has managed to gain a bit of inspiration while listening to the podcast.
Something.
Go grab their instrument. Maybe transcribe something like Sian said, or have a listen to some stuff and get it stuck in your brain before you have a play of it. And remember, everyone, every path leads to your goals eventually. You just need to take them all. Until next time, I'll see you later. Bye.